The first time I saw him, I was halfway through ruining another cigarette and my own damn life. He just stood there in that doorway, sawdust on his arms. Sunlight caught in his hair, looking at me like he already knew I didn't belong here. When the court ordered me to leave New York and rebuild my character in some forgotten town in northern Oregon, I thought it was a joke. How do you rebuild something that was never whole to begin with? I had lost my job at the firm, my boyfriend, and half my reputation after one stupid, very public breakdown. I was 29, bitter, and barely holding myself together. The town was called Cedar Hollow, the kind of place where time got stuck somewhere between the 1970s and a postcard dream. People here greeted each other with slow nods and stories about weather. Every house smelled like pine and patience. And then there was Eli Turner. He ran a small carpentry shop by the edge of town, right where the forest began to swallow the road. Locals said he could fix anything made of wood, but no one ever talked about his past. Good man, they'd say, keeps to himself, which in a town like this meant either saint or sinner. My supervisor, a local sheriff with too much authority and not enough compassion, assigned me to community service under Eli's workshop. You'll learn discipline, he told me. I rolled my eyes. I didn't need discipline. I needed a way out. But that first day, watching Eli work, the precision of his hands, the quiet strength in every motion, something inside me began to soften. He was all stillness and focus, every movement measured, every breath calm. I envied him. City boy, huh? He said, not looking up. Is it that obvious? I muttered. He smiled faintly. You keep checking your phone. Out here, we listen to trees instead. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I watched his hands, the way he sanded the edge of a wooden chair, tenderly, like touching something fragile. There was a kind of poetry in his silence. Days turned into weeks. My mornings started smelling like cedar instead of smoke. My nights stopped feeling like punishment. Eli never asked about my past, never judged. He talked about the wood, how each piece carried its own memory, how even a broken plank could be reshaped if you were patient enough. I wondered if he was talking about me. One evening, as the sun bled orange behind the hills, we worked late repairing an old church bench. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of pine resin and rain about to fall. I reached for the hammer at the same time he did, and our hands brushed. It was the smallest touch, a flicker, a spark. But it lingered. He looked up. His eyes, a deep, muted blue, held something raw, something like fear. I should close up, he said quietly, pulling back his hand. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat locked. After that night, Eli kept his distance. He still taught me, still guided my clumsy attempts at carpentry, but there was a wall between us now. I caught him staring sometimes, quick glances that felt like confessions he couldn't make. And then, one afternoon, I saw it, a scar running across his ribs when his shirt lifted as he reached for a plank. Deep, pale, deliberate. He froze when he noticed me looking. Don't, he whispered. I wasn't, you were. His tone was sharp, but his eyes betrayed something else, pain, maybe shame. That night I couldn't sleep. The image of that scar haunted me. Who hurt him? Or worse, who did he hurt? The next morning, rain swept over Cedar Hollow, turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud. Eli didn't show up at the shop. I waited, pacing, pretending I didn't care. But by noon, worry drowned the pretense. I found myself walking toward his cabin through the forest path, soaked to the bone. When I reached his porch, he was there sitting in the doorway, eyes red, a half-empty bottle beside him. You shouldn't be here, he said. I could say the same. He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You don't know who I am, Daniel. Hearing my name in his mouth did something strange to me. Then tell me, I said softly. He stared at the rain, silent for a long time. Then, without looking at me, he spoke. 2 years ago, I killed someone. The words hit me like thunder. My breath caught. You're joking. I wish I was. He turned to me, eyes wet. It was an accident. My brother, he was drunk. We fought. He fell. I tried to save him, but his voice broke. They called it manslaughter. I served a year. When I got out, I came here. To disappear. The truth hung heavy between us, like the rain pressing against the roof. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly. "Just don't look at me like I'm something good. I'm not." I knelt beside him, rain dripping from my hair, heart pounding. "Maybe not," I whispered, "but you're trying. That counts for something." He looked at me, then really looked, and something in his eyes cracked open. Vulnerability. Need. Hope. I reached out, brushing my thumb against his cheek, feeling the tremble beneath his skin. He didn't pull away. That night, the storm swallowed the town whole. But inside that small cabin, with the rain tapping the windows like a heartbeat, something inside both of us began to heal. Eli wasn't the monster he thought he was, and I wasn't the failure I'd been called. We were just two broken men learning how to be whole again, one nail, one heartbeat, one hesitant touch at a time. The morning after the storm, Cedar Hollow looked reborn, washed clean, like someone had taken a deep breath for the first time in years. The air smelled of rain and earth, and sunlight dripped through the wet branches. Eli was already in the workshop when I arrived, though he didn't look at me. His movements were mechanical, distant, like he'd rebuilt his walls overnight. The only sound was the rhythm of the saw and the faint creak of the wood giving in. "I thought you wouldn't come back," he said without turning. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But then I remembered you owe me an explanation on how to fix that damn rocking chair." A flicker of a smile ghosted across his lips. "You're persistent. Occupational hazard," I said, shrugging. "City boys don't know when to quit." He finally looked at me, and in his eyes, there was something softer now. Regret, maybe, or the ghost of something that wanted to grow. "Daniel," he began, voice low, "last night shouldn't have happened." I forced a laugh. "Which part? The confession or the rain?" His jaw tightened. "Both." But I could see it, the tremor in his hand as he set down the chisel, the way his breath caught when our eyes met. Whatever he said, I knew he didn't want me gone. "I'm not scared of what you told me," I said, stepping closer. "You should be. I've already lived through worse." That made him pause. For a long moment, we just stood there surrounded by sawdust and silence. Two men who didn't know how to stop breaking. Over the next few weeks, we worked side by side in a strange rhythm, him building furniture, me learning how to stay still. Sometimes he'd hum while sanding, low and soft, and I'd forget the world existed. Sometimes, in the middle of a joke or a shared glance, something in my chest would ache, that dangerous kind of ache that feels like falling. But Cedar Hollow had eyes. Whispers began after Mrs. Whitmore saw me leaving Eli's cabin one evening. "He's hiding something," I overheard someone say at the diner. "And that city boy? You think he's here for work or for trouble?" Small towns don't need proof to believe a rumor. By the end of that week, people started avoiding us. The sheriff, my supervisor, called me into his office, his mouth set in a straight, tight line. "You've been spending a lot of time with Turner," he said. "He's my work partner. He's your project, not your partner." His tone sharpened. "You're here to get your life together, not to get involved with people like him." "People like him?" I repeated, heat rising in my voice. He leaned back, unimpressed. "A convict, Daniel. A man who killed his own brother. You think that's the kind of influence you need?" I clenched my fists under the table. "He made a mistake. He paid for it. You think that makes it right?" The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because I had once believed them too. That night, I went to Eli's cabin again. He was sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of oak into the shape of a bird. He didn't look surprised to see me. "They're talking, huh?" he asked without lifting his head. "Yeah. I told you this would happen. I don't care." "You should," he said quietly. "You've got a chance to start over. Don't waste it on someone who's already ruined." "Stop saying that," I snapped. "You're not ruined." "You're what?" His voice cracked. "Broken? Haunted? I can't change what I did, Daniel. No amount of sanding or building fixes that." "Then let me help you try," I said, stepping closer. He dropped the knife. The wood fell to the floor, unfinished. "Why? Why do you care so much?" Because you make me feel like I'm not broken either. The words hung between us, trembling. Then, without warning, he reached out and pulled me closer, one hand gripping my shirt, the other trembling against my back. It wasn't a kiss at first. It was an apology, a question, a need. Then it deepened, raw, desperate, the kind of kiss that feels like a promise and a curse all at once. When we broke apart, breathless, the world felt quieter. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. Neither do I said. But maybe we can figure it out. Days blurred into something almost beautiful. We worked, we talked, we fought. I started spending nights at his cabin, learning how to light a fire, how to listen to silence. He taught me to carve, said wood was honest, that it never pretended to be more than it was. Sometimes, he'd trace my hand with his thumb, murmuring things he didn't mean for me to hear. You don't belong here, he'd say softly. You deserve a life bigger than this. And I'd answer, maybe this is the first thing that feels real. But the town wasn't ready for real. One afternoon, someone painted the word murderer across the door of Eli's workshop. Red paint, fresh, dripping. Eli stood there staring at it for a long time, jaw tight, hands shaking. I felt rage boil inside me, the kind that makes your vision blur. Who did this? I shouted. We'll go to the sheriff. No, his voice was low, deadly calm. We don't feed fire with fire. He picked up a brush and started scrubbing. I tried to help, but he stopped me. This is mine to clean, he said. Took him hours. When he finished, the door was clean again, but his knuckles were bleeding. That night he didn't speak. Not even when I reached for him. He just sat by the window, staring at the trees like they were ghosts, whispering things he couldn't forget. The next morning, he was gone. I searched everywhere, the shop, the river, the forest. Nothing. Panic clawed at my throat. Finally, I found him at the edge of town, standing by a half-finished bridge that crossed the creek. I can't stay here anymore, he said when he saw me. They'll never let me forget. You don't have to forget, I said. You just have to live. He shook his head. You don't get it, Daniel. Every time I see someone flinch when I walk by, I remember his face. My brother's. The way he looked at me before he stopped, choking on the memory. I killed him. I don't get to move on. I stepped closer, gripping his shoulders. You do. Because you're still here. Because you're trying. That's what moving on looks like. For a long moment, he just stared at me, torn between belief and guilt. Then he pulled me into him, holding me so tight I could feel his heart hammering through his chest. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Maybe not, I said, smiling through tears. But I'm not leaving. Summer crept in quietly after that. The forest grew thick and alive again. Life in Cedar Hollow moved slower, like it always had, but something between us had changed, grown roots. We built furniture for the townspeople who still dared to come to the shop. Slowly, the whispers softened. Mrs. Whitmore even asked us to fix her porch swing, pretending she'd never said a word against him. But peace, in places like this, is always fragile. One afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the workshop. A man in a suit stepped out, tall, sharp, carrying an air of polished cruelty that screamed city. He introduced himself as Alan Pierce, a lawyer from Portland. I'm here on behalf of the Turner family estate, he said. You're Eli Turner, correct? Eli froze. Yes. The lawyer handed him an envelope. Your brother's widow is selling the family house. She thought you might want to claim some belongings before it's demolished. Eli's hands trembled as he opened the letter. His eyes scanned the paper, then dimmed. She still blames me, he said quietly. She's grieving, I said. People hold on to pain when they don't know what else to do. He looked up at me. Will you come with me? Anywhere, I said without hesitation. We drove 2 hours north, the road winding through mountains and silence. When we arrived, the house looked like time had swallowed it, dust, vines, and memories clinging to every surface. Inside, everything smelled like ghosts. Old wood, old sorrow. Eli walked through the rooms in silence. He paused in front of a photo on the wall, 2 boys, laughing, covered in mud. That was the day we built our first treehouse, he murmured. He was always better than me at everything. I hated him for it. And I loved him more than anyone. I wanted to reach for him, but something in the way he stared at that photo stopped me. It was like he was saying goodbye to the person he used to be. In the living room, he found a box of his brother's things, drawings, letters, old tools. He sat on the floor, holding a small wooden bird, half-carved, unfinished. He was making this the night we fought, he said, voice breaking. I never finished it. I knelt beside him. Then finish it now. He looked at me, eyes glistening. Then he nodded. We stayed there until sunset, carving in silence. When he was done, he set the bird on the windowsill. The light caught its wings, glowing gold. I think he'd forgive you, I said softly. Eli closed his eyes. Maybe it's time I forgive myself. Outside, the last light of day stretched across the hills. The world felt quiet again, but not empty, just waiting. When he turned to me, there was something new in his expression. Not peace, not joy, but acceptance. I want to stay, he said. Here. With you. And for the first time since I met him, I believed he meant it. Autumn arrived in Cedar Hollow like a gentle apology. The forests blazed in shades of amber and red. The air smelled of smoke and cinnamon. And for once, the silence didn't feel like punishment. Felt like peace. Eli and I had been back for 3 months since visiting his old home. 3 months of slow rebuilding his shop, his name, and whatever fragile thing had grown between us. He still didn't talk much about the past, but something had changed. He smiled more, laughed sometimes quietly, like he wasn't used to the sound yet. He started going into town again, head held high. People had begun to soften too. One afternoon, as I was sweeping sawdust from the floor, Mrs. Whitmore stopped by the shop. She brought us pie apple, still warm, wrapped in a towel. Thought you boys could use something sweet, she said, setting it on the counter. Thank you, ma'am, Eli replied, surprised. She nodded. You've done good work on my porch. Real sturdy. Her eyes flicked between us, a flicker of something like understanding passing through. Then she added, people talk less when they've got something worth admiring. When she left, Eli looked at me with a faint, crooked smile. Did we just get small-town approval? Officially certified, I said. 1 pie equals forgiveness. He laughed, a warm, low sound that still made my heart ache in all the right ways. Our lives fell into a rhythm that was simple, almost sacred. Mornings were for work, sanding, measuring, building. Evenings were for quiet, a shared meal, a walk through the woods, sometimes a kiss that tasted like peace after years of running. One night, I caught him sketching something by the fireplace. A small table drawn with careful precision. What's that? I asked, leaning over his shoulder. A dining table, he said. For 2. I figured we should stop eating off the workbench. I smiled. You're making us a home. He didn't look up, just kept drawing. Maybe I already did. But the past, no matter how far you bury it, has a way of whispering your name. It happened one cold evening in November. A man from the city came to the workshop, a journalist. He'd heard rumors about the ex-con Carpenter and his new life. He wanted to write a story. Eli froze when the man pulled out his recorder. I'm not interested, he said flatly. It could help you, I offered gently. People would see who you are now. Or they'll see what I was. Eli snapped, voice sharper than he meant. The journalist left, frustrated. I stood there in the doorway, watching the light fade from the sky, feeling the weight of his words sink in. Later that night, as the fire crackled low, I asked softly, why does it still hurt so much to talk about it? He stared into the flames. Because every time I do, I feel like I'm dragging him back. My brother. Like I can't let him rest. I took his hand. Maybe telling the truth doesn't disturb him. Maybe it sets both of you free. He looked at me then, eyes shimmering in the firelight. You really think people can forgive? I think the right ones already have. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The fire popped softly. The clock ticked in the background, and I could almost feel the past exhaling, loosening its hold. just a little. Winter came early that year. Snow blanketed Cedar Hollow, turning it into something out of a dream, quiet, endless, clean. We started building toys for the children in town, small wooden animals, painted by hand. It was Eli's idea. "Kids don't judge," he said with a half smile. "Maybe we should learn from them." The shop became a haven. Laughter, the smell of pine, and the sound of hammers filled the air. People who had once crossed the street to avoid him now brought coffee and conversation. I watched it happen, the slow, patient miracle of forgiveness. One evening, near Christmas, the sheriff came by. The same man who once told me to stay away from Eli. He stood awkwardly at the door, hat in his hands. "Heard you've been keeping the kids happy," he said. "Good work, Turner." Eli blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. "Thank you, sir." The sheriff nodded once. "Town's better with you in it." And then he walked away. It wasn't much, but it was enough. On Christmas Eve, we closed the shop early. Snow was falling in slow, perfect flakes. Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth, candles flickering, soft music playing from the old radio. Eli poured 2 cups of coffee, handed me one, and said, "You know, when I first met you, I thought you'd last maybe a week here. I was planning on 3 days," I admitted. He chuckled. "What changed?" "You," I said simply. "You and this place. You made it feel like starting over didn't have to mean starting alone." He set his cup down, reached across the table, and took my hand. His touch was steady, warm. "You did that for me too." For a moment, everything else disappeared, the years we'd both lost, the pain, the judgment. There was just this small, wooden room, 2 hearts still learning how to beat without breaking. Then, quietly, he said, "I've been thinking. Dangerous." He smiled. "I want to rebuild the bridge over the creek. The one that collapsed last spring." "You mean the one we almost fell off when you were teaching me how to carry lumber?" "The very one," he said, laughing. "But this time I want to do it right. Strong enough to last. Like us," I teased. "Exactly like us." The bridge became our new project. Day by day, through frost and thaw, we built it plank by plank, side by side. The town helped too, bringing food, tools, laughter. It wasn't just a bridge anymore. It was a symbol of connection, of rebuilding, of forgiveness that reached further than either of us expected. When we finally finished, the first day of spring had just begun. The snow melted into streams, wildflowers pushing through the earth. We stood on the bridge together, watching the water rush beneath. "You know," I said, "if someone told me 2 years ago that I'd end up here, building bridges with a carpenter who once terrified me, I'd have laughed in their face." He smiled softly. "And now I'd tell them I finally understand what home means." He turned to me, his expression full of something quiet and infinite. "You are home, Daniel." I felt the words settle deep inside, like roots finding soil. That summer, we finished the table he'd designed, solid oak, smooth and simple. We placed it by the window where morning light would catch it first. On its surface sat the wooden bird he'd carved for his brother, wings spread wide. Sometimes I'd find Eli sitting there, running his fingers over the grain, eyes distant but peaceful. "He'd like this," he said once. "He always wanted to build something that lasted." I smiled. "You did." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw no trace of guilt in his eyes, only warmth. The years that followed weren't perfect, but they were ours. Cedar Hollow became more than the place we were sent to start over. It became the place where we learned to live without apology. The town accepted us slowly but surely. The kids grew up calling Eli Mr. Turner, their favorite toy maker. I started writing again, small essays about life in quiet places, about love that healed instead of hiding. We never left. We didn't need to. Every morning, the sound of his hammer still echoed through the valley, steady, certain, alive. Every night, we'd sit on the porch watching the stars bloom above the pines, our hands brushing, hearts steady. And sometimes, when the wind moved through the trees just right, I could almost hear it, the soft whisper of forgiveness, the sound of 2 broken souls finally at peace. Years later, people in Cedar Hollow would tell the story differently. Some said it was about redemption. Some said it was about love that refused to die. For me, it was simpler. It was about a man who taught me how to build again, not with wood, but with trust. It was about learning that broken doesn't mean unworthy. It was about finding beauty in the quiet, strength in forgiveness, and forever in a small town that never stopped watching. And when I think back to that first day, the city boy and the carpenter, strangers in the dust and light, I realize now that maybe we were never rebuilding our lives. Maybe we were building each other. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.